Part 2. "What do they want?" I asked my mother. "They've come to ask for your father's help," she replied. "Unless we help, they may be killed or taken away by some bad men." I'd like to stop here and ask question number 2. Now, why do you think this could be considered foreshadowing? This is a particular phrase. It says, "Unless we help, they may be killed or taken away by some bad men." We do identify this as foreshadowing. Do you think that this is a correct label? Is this foreshadowing? Why or why not? Let's continue with the story. Some of the children held on tightly to the hands of their fathers. Some clung to their mothers. One little girl sat on the ground crying. I felt like crying too. "Father," I said, "please help them." My father stood quietly next to me, but I knew he saw the children. Then some of the men in the crowd began climbing over the fence. Borislav and Guji, 2 young men who worked for my father, tried to keep the crowd calm. My father walked outside, peering through the curtains. I saw him standing on the steps. Borislav translated what my father said. He asked the crowd to choose 5 people to come inside and talk. My father met downstairs with the 5 men. My father could speak Japanese, Chinese, Russian, German, French, and English. At this meeting, everyone spoke Russian. I couldn't help but stare out the window and watch the crowd while downstairs. For 2 hours, my father listened to frightening stories. These people were refugees. Refugees are people who ran away from their homes because if they stayed, they would be killed. They were Jews from Poland, escaping from the Nazi soldiers who had taken over their country. The 5 men had heard my father could give them visas, official written permission to travel through another country. The hundreds of Jewish refugees outside hoped to travel east through the Soviet Union and end up in Japan. Once in Japan, they could go to another country. Was it true? The men asked. Could my father issue these visas? If he did not, the Nazis would soon catch up with them. My father answered that he could issue a few, but not hundreds. To do that, he would have to ask for permission from his government in Japan. That night, the crowd stayed outside our house, exhausted from the day's excitement. I slept soundly, but it was one of the worst nights of my father's life. He had to make a decision. If he helped these people, would he put our family in danger? If the Nazis found out, what would they do? But if he did not help these people, they could all die. My mother listened to the bed squeak as my father tossed and turned all night. The next day, my father said he was going to ask his government about the visas. My mother agreed it was the right thing to do. My father sent his message by cable Guji took my father's written message down to the telegraph office. I watched the crowd as they waited for the Japanese government's reply. The 5 representatives came into our house several times that day to ask if an answer had been received. Any time the gate opened, the crowd tried to charge inside. Finally, the answer came from the Japanese government. It was no. My father could not issue that many visas to Japan. For the next 2 days, he thought about what he would do. Hundreds more Jewish refugees joined the crowd. My father sent a second message to his government, and again the answer was no. We still couldn't go outside. My little brother, Haruki, cried often because we were running out of milk. I grew tired of staying indoors. I asked my father constantly, "Why are those people here? What do they want? Why do they have to be here? Who are they?" My father always took the time to explain everything to me. He said the refugees needed his help and they needed permission from him to go to another part of the world where they would be safe. "I cannot help these people yet," he calmly told me, "but when the time comes, I will help them all that I can." Question number 3. Think ahead. I'd like for you to predict what might happen. Use foreshadowing clues from the text to explain your prediction. So you're going to make a prediction about what you think, what might happen next. And that was number 3.